Have you ever felt stuck in your growth journey, wondering how to build resilience in the face of challenges?
Or maybe you're looking to shift your mindset and unlock your full potential.
Well, if you said yes, then you are in the right place.
Welcome to the Stretch Zone. I'm Hannah.
And I am Feds.
And here we explore self-development, nurture resilience, and embrace the mindset shifts that help you grow beyond your limits.
Hello and welcome back, my friends. How is everyone? How are you, Hannah?
Great, thank you. I am exceedingly chilly, however, in Cleveland this week. And it is mighty cold out there. How about yourself?
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, the weather has been pretty miserable here as well in Italy, so I can relate to that, to be honest.
I at least have some sunshine today, but it is
I know.
hell outside.
It looks actually quite wonderful. Like the light of the sun, I'm missing that so much. Today's been blah.
It's wonderful while
But
sun.
exactly. But I guess it's just the season.
It is.
And yeah, we just have to cope with it.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, like when you were talking about the weather, when I was talking about how miserable it is at the moment,
Mm.
the very first thing that came to mind is the fact that when I was in the UK, the weather made me feel very depressed. And especially when I was in Leeds, like the main problem for me was that I didn't really have friends to spend time with. You know, when it's like a miserable day and you're like, well, I can always go to the cinema with a friend, or I could just go
Mhm.
and get a cup of tea with a friend. But I didn't really have anyone to do that.
Yeah.
And it is kind of connected to what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to talk about relationships and how powerful they can be when we create a connection with someone in our life, and how
Yeah.
beneficial it could be as well.
Yeah. We're going to talk about how the connection of a relationship, not just with others, but we're also going to talk about the connection of a relationship with ourselves. So self-love. And then we're going to touch on romantic relationships. The two of us find ourselves living overseas and finding our long-term partner, but we've also had single times as well, of course.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the dynamics of that. And I think we've touched on it in the past. You've definitely mentioned it about some of your moves where you've been single and some of your moves where you've been in a partnership, and the differences.
Hmm.
Um, and then also just we're going to touch on today about friendship and family, and exploring the different types of connections that
Hmm.
might help us grow emotionally. So we're going to talk about
Hmm.
the emotional side of relationships. And just in general, we're going to sort of touch on trying to build healthy relationships. And I just want to caveat here, Feds and I do not think that we are masters of all of our domain here. The point of our conversations is to try and bring it into sort of an everyday life situation and just have a discussion about how that's going in our life, what we might improve, and just sharing our experiences along the way.
Yeah. I am definitely in no way whatsoever a relationship master. That's for sure. So, yeah, that's not what we're doing here. But what we can definitely do is having a little bit of a in-depth conversation about what relationships are, what they mean to us. You
Yeah.
can tell us what they mean to you guys, wherever you are in the world. And I think it would be interesting to start from a little bit of a definition, okay, of what is a relationship. Because what is a relationship to me may not be a relationship to someone else. So, what can you tell us about that, Hannah?
That's a good question. What is a relationship? Um, Gosh, I wasn't prepared for that question. Now I feel like I need to really conjure up something profound. What is a relationship to me? I guess I am instantly thinking about romantic, but it
Hmm.
isn't, because I've just touched points on all those things. I guess it's about communicating with another or with yourself in an open, I guess I'm thinking of it as a healthy relationship. I'm probably tagging on the word here. So what is a relationship?
Hmm.
Um, all sorts of things. It's friendship, it's camaraderie, it's sharing, it's experiences, it's love, it's depth, it's feeling part of a community, it's being accepted. Gosh, that's a really big question. What's a relationship? What do you think?
You know, I think you are right. I think that like a relationship really encompasses a lot of different definitions. So it doesn't necessarily have to be between two people. It could be. It doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. It could be platonic. It could be a family relationship. It could be a community, as you mentioned earlier. So, and I think in our lives, we all experiment with different kind of relationships in different moments of our lives, and so it's important to take a look at how important they are and
Yeah,
how they shape us in that sense. But yeah, I totally agree with you. It is hard to define precisely what a relationship is. I think to me the main word that comes to mind is connection.
yeah. Because actually relationship doesn't, because I added the word healthy, I was thinking a positive relationship. But actually
Hmm.
relationship doesn't necessarily mean that it is a positive one. It's still, a relationship, I think you've just nailed it.
Hmm.
Relationship is a connection. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be happy and wonderful. But the
Hmm.
word relationship is connection. Yeah, I like that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Stopped with that.
So, for the sake of our conversation today, we're going to focus on the positive relationships that we have in our life, because otherwise we're going to open a big can of worms that
Yeah.
needs definitely more time and space.
Hmm.
But there is a whole chunk of science and theories that we always like to explore a little bit. And again, we are not experts by any means, but there are some things that, of course, we know from school, from experience as well. So, um, relationships have a very strong impact on our psychology, on our biology as well. So, psychologically, biologically, relationships are important. And connection between human beings is literally the reason why we are still here today. So, from a psychological perspective, relationships are important because they give us these emotional support that we need when we are in need, when we are feeling low, when we are feeling lonely. Like, we are social creatures. We
Yeah.
need to be around others. We need others to feel part of a group, which also helps us with identity. This sense of belonging. And interestingly enough, I've been doing a course in the last few weeks on teaching. And surprisingly, even, for example, when you go to school, when you go to university, when you are in a learning environment, this sense of belonging is essential because it makes you feel part of a group, it makes you feel accepted. And so, even if you make mistakes, who cares? We're all on the same boat. It is essential for mental health.
Yeah.
Again, having positive relationships has a crucial impact on stress, on anxiety, on depression. And it's not a surprise that the very first things that happens to people when they are depressed is this idea of isolation, not the desire of not wanting to be with anyone. And it's an opportunity to learn and to grow. And one of the things that we spoke about in the last episode, and I think the one before as well, was Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
So, in this pyramid of needs that it's basically shared by all human beings, relationships are at the foundation. So, without relationships, we are not able to grow and get to a higher level with self-actualization and this opportunity to realize bigger goals, reach higher desires. We would not be able to do that. So relationships are almost at the same level of shelter and food. Okay.
Yeah.
So it does have, they have a very strong impact. And as we mentioned, from a biological point of view, the reason why we exist is really because we had relationships. These groups of humans, they managed to survive simply because they could rely on each other. They would help each other. They were supporting each other.
Mm.
So it really does have an impact on who we are and
Really.
what we do.
Yeah.
And I think a good way to talk about this is connecting to what is emotional intelligence and how this takes us out of our comfort zone, which is what we like to talk about here. And emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize our emotions, regulate our emotions, being able to manage our emotions in a healthy manner.
And then probably communicate them to those
And,
around us.
probably communicate them exactly. So, emotional intelligence has an impact on self-awareness, or so understanding what I am doing and how what I do has an impact on others. Self-regulation, how do I control the way I feel and the way I behave? Because we are surrounded by others. We don't live in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It can help us m- managing our motivation. Why do we do things? Of course, it can help us becoming more empathetic. Okay, so there's a lot to say. There's a lot to unpack here, and I'm curious to know what this came like. What does this make you think? What is coming up for you when we talked about all of these different things?
I mean, wow, this is a really in-depth topic.
Yeah,
And
we're
just,
diving in.
I mean, there were so many different thoughts that came up there in terms of um, just our survival, our general survival. Humans really need humans,
Mm-hmm.
and the current lifestyles the modern way of living, is very much sort of fend for yourself kind of thing. Without getting really deep here and starting to talk about the roles of males and females and more, things have really started to change a bit, and I think there's always room for change, and we should be changing and evolving, so I'm not against
Mm-hmm.
that. But I also think that quite a lot of us um, are forgetting to rely on other people as well. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
I think that word is incorrect. It's not rely on other people, because we don't like that word. A lot of us sort of feel like, I don't know, like the modern way of boss babe, and you've got this, you can do anything you want, you put your mind to, you can, but you need support.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's the part sometimes is almost lacking, is where do you find that support group? And that really intrigues me, because I know that I am so much better when I'm part of a team. I
Mm-hmm.
like, for example, um, you reached out to me initially about the podcast. Should we do this together? And instantly I was just like, hell yes. Because I was just like, finally, I'm doing something like this together with someone else. I've been,
Yeah.
fumbling around trying all sorts of things on my own, but this is probably the longest I've stuck to something because I'm part of a team, and we're here to support each other. And I'm
Yeah.
enjoying this process so much more. I feel like much more accountable for the
Yeah.
actions that I'm
Mm-hmm.
taking, because it's not just letting myself down if I don't turn up. I'm also letting you down. We can bounce ideas off of each other. Sometimes you have a point of view on something that's so simple that I've just totally forgotten. And it's like really simple stuff to do with technology, and I'm like, "How did I never think of that?" And I know I've done it for you, like, you recently
Yeah.
said, "Oh, hey, something, something," and I said, "Why don't we just create a new account which we can both share?" And you're like, "Oh, yeah, I
Mhm.
forgot about that."
Yeah.
And it's just trying to do everything on our own.
Mhm.
Yes, it's great if that's really possible, but
Mhm.
humans need humans. We need each other. It's so apparent. And I guess, look, sorry to keep going on here because that was a big
No, no. No, no, go, go.
big
No,
open
please.
question. And I'm thinking as I speak. Going back to, I find this fascinating. Going back to the time that I felt that my lowest, which was only about a year and a half ago, when I first moved to the US, nothing to do with the US, situationally, I was at my most isolated. Yes, I
Mhm.
was in a relationship with my husband.
Mhm.
He's around, but we both said, and we both look back at that time and say, we have never felt more lonely. And that was the most profound thing. It was loneliness. We were so profoundly lonely when we first moved out here. And then I got into quite I started to probably drop into a bit of depression. And when you're depressed, you pull away. So then you perpetuate that feeling. You pull away from people because you don't want to be surrounded. You don't want to let other people know this side of you. That's how I felt.
Mhm.
So then you're not allowing people to be there and to support you and to lift you or to take on and share some of the burden.
Yeah.
um and I knew at the time that I was doing that, but I could not break free for a while. It took
Yeah.
so much energy to break free. And I think I've said this, the one thing that made me start to feel better was that first connection that I made. And from
Mhm.
then on, I could see that I could start to feel better and
Mhm.
feel like I'm part of something. I
Mhm.
know that I'm an incredibly sociable person. So,
Mhm.
it's not always that way for people,
Yeah.
but that was really profoundly noticeable in
Mhm.
how I felt mentally at that
Yeah.
time.
When you were talking about the fact that we live in a historical period where it is very hard to rely on others, and it almost feels like relying on others it's a bad
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
right? But it really made me think of the very first thing that I noticed, and I already knew it, but when I moved to Italy, I actually realized how real that was. How my father, who is 83, 82,
mhm,
um, lives his relationships, and how I live my relationships, in the sense that
mhm,
he's the kind of person who would still just go to someone's home uninvited just because he needs to ask a question, right?
mhm,
And so we had conversations, and I was like, you can't really show up at people's home uninvited just because you need to ask a question or just because you need something. And he
mhm,
always says, oh, but they're my friends, they're my friends, they're my friends. And I'm like, all right, okay. And then, of course, what the result is that when people need something, they call him. So if someone needs a job, if someone needs a new electrician, if someone needs, I don't know, a contact or whatever, they just go to him because they know that he is there, he is available. And so inevitably what happens is that everybody knows my dad,
mhm,
literally, and he knows everybody. And so of course, whenever I'm like, oh, I really need someone who could help me with that, he knows someone. And
yeah,
it's amazing because what I would do is not that. And probably this is also me having lived 10 years in London and having
yeah,
created this kind of idea that,
yeah,
can I really trust others? Can I really just ask a question? Can I tell to someone, hey, I need help. Can you help me with that?
mhm.
So it's definitely a generational thing.
It
I think
is.
it's also a cultural thing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that. Yeah, having I'm trying to think of all the places that I've lived and where it was maybe easier and where it was harder. Um, I I agree that it's a generational thing. And it's very difficult to break that cycle because we know what it's like to have people in our lives and to have
Mhm.
support. Um, but yet we still sort of fear, oh, they might judge us, or I don't know. Like just before we came here, I asked my neighbor to bring my I would call it a wheelie bin. In America, they'd call it a trash can. It's made of plastic. It's not a can. Anyway, I asked her to bring it in a few days after we left because I didn't want it sat outside the whole time. Um, but I definitely, even that, I felt like, oh gosh, will that be okay to ask? And I remember
Yeah,
just thinking, why on earth am I worried about this? And of course, she was totally fine about it.
I know, I
I
know.
had to think about it for a minute.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I completely hear you. Like, I really hear where you're coming from. Surprisingly, I think that one of the time for me when I felt most supported was probably when I was in London. And not because London is a welcoming place,
No,
because it is not
no,
by any means.
no.
And it was so hard to find people I trusted.
Mhm.
But once you get into a community, once you get into a circle of people, then it becomes so much easier. And especially with expats uh, or immigrants, however you want to call them, right?
Yeah,
um, you really feel this kind of support, this kind of connection that you would not feel otherwise, because we are all in the same place. We are here to help each other. And this is something that, for example, I didn't have the chance to feel when I was in Leeds. Not because Leeds is a bad place. In fact, I think Northerners are much more friendly than
yeah.
Londoners, 100%. It's just that I didn't have the chance to spend time and meet people and go out. And I was working alone, I was working at home. So,
Yeah.
in general, it was just a very challenging moment to create relationships, you know? And
Also,
so,
let's
mhm,
just let's just acknowledge this. Both of us can agree to this, and I think everyone else out there that's experienced this. When you were in Leeds, you were in a relationship.
yeah.
And I can definitely say that before I met my now husband, I was in a mental place that was just like out there speaking to loads more people. When you become part of a relationship, it can, from I would say most people would agree with this, that and I know I've spoken to other people about this too. It becomes harder because then you end up spending so much time in your couple. It's a safe place. It's just, I think everyone, even if you haven't lived overseas, can relate to this.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
circle becomes potentially smaller.
Yeah.
Some people will say it gets bigger depending on whether you both are really sort of outgoing people. But on the
Yeah.
whole, even if just one of you is not outgoing, then usually you'll become less kind of out there as
Exactly.
a person. So the dynamic changes massively when
Yeah.
you become a couple and you're then moving to a new place. And I know absolutely 100% that when I was single, I had way more friends and
Hmm.
I was living in Vietnam, and you just referred to it as the expats, all the foreigners basically get together. And I would say that was the quickest time I integrated. I
Yeah.
had 50% Vietnamese friends, 50% loads of foreigners, and then I met my husband sort of about a year or so in when I was living in Vietnam. Um,
Hmm.
and I I do think that in sort of Asian, maybe Middle Eastern countries, when there's a big group of sort of foreigners getting together, that expat community is really intense, and it's
Hmm.
like this solid family type feeling. Then I
Yeah.
moved to Australia, which is closer to where I'm from, and I moved as a couple. So then his family was there, then you start to sort of rely a bit more on family stuff. And I definitely had less friends there. And then, of course, I've moved to the
Yeah.
US as a couple again, and we know no one. Um, and it's taken time, but now we
Yeah.
meet people. It's
Yeah.
really like we had to make a huge effort to do that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's also, as you said, there are a lot of variables that make it different, like
Yeah.
from person to person, of course. Like I'm in a relationship where I am extremely sociable, and my husband is the polar opposite of me.
Yeah.
Like he could be on a desert island and he would be happy. He has three friends and he's very happy.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for him, but this is something that we've always discussed. Like,
Yeah.
I need people.
Me too.
And, sometimes I've actually wondered if it's just like a cultural thing or if it's um, we have these, like what we were talking about before, like from a biological standpoint, we are social creatures.
Mm.
But then sometimes there are also people who are definitely not social
Yeah.
creatures. And it's okay,
And
like we
even
have
if you
evolved.
like look at your husband, for example, you've just said he's happy with three friends, but he's
Hmm.
still got those three friends. And I
Yeah.
bet you they know everything to a point about each other, or
Well,
do
yeah,
all
I
the
was just
activities
about
together.
to talk. I was
Yeah,
just
but
about
they
to
still
talk
rely on
about that.
each other, right?
See, kind of. And again, I think this is a cultural thing because my Italian friends are very talkative about feelings, emotions. They are
Okay, yeah,
very
that's not
passionate.
shocking.
You know, like they talk about breakups and makeups and stuff, and just like it's just part of who we are, right? And I
Sure.
that's my Italian side, who's definitely a bit more dormant at the moment.
Okay, he's
But
waiting.
it's there. But sometimes, like he used to go out with his mates, and he used to come back home, of course, and I would be like, "Oh, okay, so how is such and such? Good, I think." It's like, what do you mean, I think? You spent like a whole evening with your mates. I was like, what do you talk about? Stuff. Well, what does it mean, stuff? So there is like a cultural thing, a generational thing,
A
a
male female
personal, a
thing.
male female thing. There's so much involved in this, but I think the main point is that regardless of our age, our nationality, our experience, relationships, whether we like it or not, they do have an impact on who we are. And if we want to stretch our comfort zone,
Yeah,
we want to, let's say, leverage, take advantage of these opportunities, because it is an opportunity, like from a very clear and easy example, like going to a networking event for business,
yeah,
to you decided to go to Vietnam and teach English and you ended up meeting your husband.
yeah.
It just happened. And so I think it's important that we try to do our very best, especially in today's
Mm.
situation, to nurture this kind of connections. And it can be quite challenging. It can be challenging.
Yeah, it can, because sometimes we get burnt. And let's just take a moment to sort of recognize that. We're
Yeah.
not saying that every single one of us should just push ourselves, be as friendly as we can to every single person.
Hmm.
But I do think, you know, because we've all had that terrible relationship, and I'm not just talking about romantic relationship, I'm sure all of us have had one fallout with a friend, and, and it really burns us, it hurts, it's painful, but I guess it's part of humanness.
Hmm.
And it's okay to also recognize when a relationship isn't working,
Yeah.
and maybe letting it go. Like, I do
Hmm.
believe in that.
Hmm.
um that in some circumstances it can help us move forwards,
Hmm.
for sure.
Hmm.
I'd be interested to know, whilst you were living so far away from home, Do you have any tips for people in terms of keeping that connection with homeland and home stuff? How did your relationship
Oh,
change? So there's two questions there.
mm,
How did you keep the relationships going and how did they change?
I think it's an answer that the answers go hand in hand.
Yeah,
Relationships inevitably change,
yeah,
and there is nothing we can do about that. And I think oftentimes people fight against this natural process that it just happens. We can't do anything about. What I did when I moved to London the first time was fighting the process. And so I was spending a stupid amount of time texting my Italian friends. Bear in mind, I didn't even have an iPhone back then, so we were like text messages, from my Nokia, from my Nokia,
yeah,
and it was. I felt like I was living two different lives.
yeah,
One in Italy that wasn't my life anymore, and one
yeah,
in London that I couldn't actually enjoy fully.
yeah,
And so what I learned is that the relationships that are meant to continue, they will just continue. And there are people who accept the fact that maybe you will not speak every single day. Maybe
yeah,
you will speak once a week. Maybe you will speak once every 2 weeks. But when you do, it feels like you have spoken the day before.
yeah,
And when it happens, it's natural. So I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that some relationships, we just need to let them go. And we need to give space to new relationships because we grow. We are different people. We are not the same people we were. I'm definitely not the same person I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And so
yeah,
the kind of people around me are different. Not everyone wants to talk about self growth and self development and introspection and reflection, and it's fine. I have friends who are much more down to earth, and yeah, we just talk shit, really. It's
yeah,
fine. But I think that often people just hold on tight to
yeah.
relationships that are just, they're just expired, you know?
Yeah, I
And
think
it's
living
okay.
overseas just probably stream or living far away from home, 'cause it doesn't even have to be
Hmm.
overseas. I think it streamlines the natural process
Hmm.
of relationships quicker.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
exactly. Yeah.
And I totally relate to what you're saying that you end up just with certain friends that you don't have to speak to every day. You
No.
pick up just where you left off. And some of those friends I've had a French friend in particular I've known since I was 10. Our families knew each other, but I think we first met properly when I was about 10. We used to do exchanges. She speaks perfect English. I speak no French. So we can see how that went. And 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 she is just someone that we can sometimes go a year or two and we haven't even spoken, but the moment that we're in each other's presence, it's just like nothing has happened, nothing's
Yeah.
changed
Yeah.
at all. And I've got a
Yeah.
couple of those types of
Yeah.
friends.
And so, like, going back to your question, what tips, like, what tips would you give to someone who is in the process of living this experience? Is just that sometimes learning to let go is as important as learning to let people in. We have to do both. It
Yeah,
is inevitable.
yeah,
And that's probably the hardest part of the process. But I also know people who struggle to let people in.
yeah,
And so they really have a hard time in creating a community or some sort of in-depth relationships because they are scared of the word rely. I don't want to rely on anyone. And I'm
yeah.
like, well, what is the point of having friends, of being in a community if you can't rely on someone? That's exactly why community exists. Not just
I
because of
like
that, but
I like to try and sort of turn it around I know a couple of people that sort of feel the way that you're describing, and I try to approach it in the way that, well, how does it make you feel when you support somebody else? Is there
Mhm.
anything there at all?
Mhm. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you have to feel profoundly wonderful and sort of like achieving, but usually there is a little warmth potentially
Mhm.
that might
Mhm.
happen when you've supported someone else in a really
Mhm.
way. And I sort of
Mhm.
think, well, if it feels okay for you, then maybe the other person also gets something out of it in helping.
Exactly.
And maybe we can change the word to rely to support,
Yeah.
support sort of feels a little less intense.
Yeah. But I think that there's also like, yes, I like the idea of seeing it from both perspectives. Like I can support you, and it feels like we have a choice. We are active. I think a lot of people prefer this kind of idea, the fact that I am supporting you, so I am a good person because I am
Mm-hmm.
doing something. While if I rely on someone, it almost has this passive idea, passive concept behind it, that either I'm weak, I'm not strong enough, I can't do it by myself. But the way I like to look at it is that if you rely on someone, it also means that you trust someone. And I think that's the hardest part of relying on someone, that to fully rely on someone, you need to trust that person. You wouldn't just, you know,
Yeah.
mm, you wouldn't just rely on someone that you really don't know and don't trust. There needs to be that kind of foundation. And I think a lot of people are scared of that,
Yeah.
you know.
Definitely.
So I think like there are a few tips here, and the first one is definitely for me. Um, Relationships are a great way to cultivate trust, little by little. You can try to really expand what is your circle network, and create your little community, which doesn't have to be big. But it can help you becoming a little bit more familiar, and appreciate a little bit more the word rely,
Yeah.
because it's important.
Yeah. I guess my tip is from the point of view of when you're moving to a new place. We haven't really touched on this, but
Mm.
it would be, I wonder if some of the listeners out there might find this useful, especially if they're about to move somewhere new. So, where can you create connections, right? So, I've touched on this in the past that most of my connections when I've moved somewhere new lately is through my dog. So for me, that and other people will be through their children. And if you don't have that little creature with you, then we've got to be a bit more creative. But for me,
Yeah.
um, pretty much every single friendship that we have in the US right now has all been sparked because of a connection to my dog Phoenix.
Hmm.
And that's either because I've literally just walked past someone and we've started a conversation, or I've done it through a Facebook group, the
Yeah.
breed my dog. That's how I've
Yeah.
actually done it.
The
Yeah.
reason why I'm laughing is because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who has a golden retriever, and he is adorable. Is the most adorable dog ever. And so they came around because we might be dog sitting. Biggie, it's called Biggie. And we were talking about the fact that sometimes he lent his dog to his mates to go for a short walk around just because they
Yeah,
wanted to
to
meet
go make.
girls. So
Yeah, of course.
exactly, and so it made me laugh because I'm like, okay, so it's a thing, get a
I mean,
dog.
it's literally we were two. So we've been in Cleveland only for a couple of nights, and we're quite close to sort of a main strip where there's lots of coffee shops. So we're kind of trying all the coffee shops because that's something we
Nice.
love to do, and we can take our dog Phoenix into them. And every single time we've done this, we have now met someone new that's had a really big conversation with us. And then they're like, oh, you're from Australia, you're from England. And they're like really interested. So now I just think Cleveland's really, really friendly
Nice.
because everybody keeps talking to us because of our dog. And
Yeah.
who knows? If we had walked in on our own, no one would have spoken to us the way that
Yeah.
they have.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
such an opener. Anyway, if you don't have a dog, you've got to be a bit more creative. And it's, I was actively going online looking for my dog as a Hungarian Vizsla. So I was actively putting in Hungarian Vizsla Atlanta, that's where I live, and then trying to find people, and connect in different ways. So that
Yeah.
might not be your link, but Facebook
Yeah.
groups are super, super important to put yourself
Mm-hmm.
out there. And
Mm-hmm.
initially, it might be that you're just responding to a few messages rather than meeting up in person. At some point, though, you know, put yourself out there.
Yeah.
That's going
Yeah.
to be the hardest part, but turn up. And maybe
Yeah.
you've got someone that maybe you're with a partner or you're not, but just, maybe there's one person that you feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm going to meet you at this time. If you're uncomfortable going somewhere new on your own, but just take your time about it.
Yeah.
Pick the
Yeah.
right
Explore. There are. Yeah. It made me think of one of my clients. She lives in Taiwan. Well, actually, I have a lot of clients from Taiwan, and she was telling me about this app that's actually pretty interesting. And so through the app, you're going to meet five other people, and the
right.
app organizes a dinner with five strangers. And
Oh, wow.
so it's actually pretty cool because you're going to go out and you're going to have a meal with five people who are strangers. And of course, it's all organized through the app. But I thought that's a pretty cool idea. You're not going to be alone. You're going to be in a public space. You're going to be definitely with other people who want to meet other people.
Yeah.
So why not?
Yeah, amazing. And I think that's the other thing is not to. I mean, I'm quite cheeky when I'm feeling good and I'm feeling like um, calm in myself. Then I will openly say to people, "Hey, I'm lonely. Want to go for a
Let's
coffee?"
spend time together. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's
But-
once I start to feel okay in myself,
Yeah.
and I'll even be cheeky and say, "Hey, I can't just spend all my time with my husband. Please, can I have a girl?
Let's
How
spend time
long?
together.
I need a girly chat. Can we go
Yeah.
and do this?" And
Yeah.
I'm quite blunt about it these days, but I'm feeling okay again in myself. So I'm
Yeah.
feeling good and relaxed as a human. I'm quite
Yeah.
open about what I need. I think
Yeah.
I think that probably is something that I'm just lucky to have the ability in me. And I think that I've known that it's always worked for me in the past is just, you know what, be honest. You know what, I don't feel great.
Yeah.
I could do with some more friends. I've got this another dog walking related one, but I bumped into this lovely lady that's at least 2 generations older than me. And we started talking, found out she's a yoga teacher. And now I go walking with her and her lovely ladies of leisure,
Oh,
because of the era that they're in. And every other week or so, I make sure that I go for a long dog walk with them. And I have to say, it's wonderful because they've got a totally different idea about the world, and I'm
hmm.
really um,
Yeah.
enjoying spending time with them. But I was
Yeah.
very open about it. I just said, I don't have many friends here.
Yeah.
Now sometimes I'll just lie and say I haven't been here very long. If
It,
I feel embarrassed,
I
I should
think,
have more friends.
well, I think often some people are not that straightforward to say, hey, I don't really know anyone. I'm like you. Like, I've never had any problems whatsoever to say, I don't really know anyone around here. Let's be friends. But
Yeah.
I also know that some people may be a little bit more reserved. But if you show up, and you talk to someone and you say, well, I've just moved here, between the lines, it goes without saying that probably you don't know a lot of people. So I guess another lesson learned here is um, try and put your message out there. And if you are talking to someone, try and read between the lines when someone tells you, I've just moved here. Or I don't really know what to do this weekend. Like I don't know. Like I don't know what to do. I don't know. Like just try and listen to what people say and see if you can be of any help. There's a lot to unpack in this
Yeah,
topic.
this feels like a really this is actually much deeper than I was anticipating, and I feel like
Yeah.
we could go on and on and on about this.
Yeah, and
There's a
we
lot more
will
I have to say.
definitely go. Yeah, we will definitely go back because I think from this topic, there's a lot to talk about, and I'm actually curious to know, like, whoever is listening, hello, let us know. Let us know what you think. Let us know what would you like to explore a little bit more. So you can come and find us, of course, on Spotify, The Stretch Zone. You can find us on YouTube, The Stretch Zone. You can find us on Instagram. So it's The Stretch Zone _podcast. And talk to us. Let us know what you think. And I think my question for you guys is about trust, because I'm curious. We talked a little bit about trust, and I wonder, how do you guys build trust
Yeah,
in relationships? How do you get to a stage where you actually feel comfortable in saying, hey, I rely on you?
absolutely. I think that's a really I think we only just touched on it and we didn't really go into how we've built our trust. So I agree. That's a whole other podcast. And also I'm wondering something else that we didn't do an awful lot about today, and again could be another topic, but it's about how do you balance, because I have quite a bit to say about this, but I didn't talk about it today. How do you balance your own self love when you're in a relationship? So it's sometimes the balance can be off and we're just giving to someone else, or it's all about us in the moment and we just need things. So how do we find that balance of I am an individual, I am worthy of my own love to myself, but also supporting someone else? I think um that's a whole nother podcast, I have to say.
Yeah, definitely. But this was a very, very nice conversation, as always. I really enjoyed it. Um, Thank you, Hannah, as
Okay.
always. And I think that it would be interesting to know what are we going to talk about the next time, which I think it might be, well, it's connected to this topic. So we're going to talk a little bit about finding community in a foreign land.
Yeah.
So we're going to explore a little bit more this idea of relationships specifically for, well, in our case, expats and people who like to travel the world like we do. It was great to talk to you as always. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Kay. Have a beautiful
And
day.
thank you guys for being here, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye. Wrapping up today's episode, remember, you don't have to face change alone.
If you'd like to connect or learn more about working with us individually, reach out to us through our Instagram account at @thestretchzone_podcast, or find our emails in the footnotes to this episode. We're here to support you on your journey, each in your own way.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Stretch Zone. If today's discussion resonated with you, remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share the episode with anyone who might benefit. Until next time, keep stretching beyond your comfort zone.